This morning Christy was writing pretty well, but now she's got her pen, sort of like, looks like she's not intent on writing much. Just kidding.
탄주 탄주 캔 아마지 와라. 그러나도 캔은 배 타르고 지와라. 그 시작하지. 그러나도 캔은 아마지 그 시작이죠. 시작할 캔이 나가서 이 캔은 푹다 지와라. 무슨 많이 뭐지 와라. 그 캔이 그다나. And this is the part
the point of rephrasing the question or reconstructing the question, changing the one question from when the Madhyamika school said, when the question went to the Madhyamika school, it was, what do you mean when you say things don't exist ultimately? And changing that to mean, this is what we mean when we say, when we talk about ultimate reality, which is a whole different question, right? Describing an example or a senshi or a classical example of what ultimate reality would be. And then when you get to, what did you guys mean when you said everything did exist nominally or deceptively, switching that over to, oh, here's what deceptive reality refers to, and more specifically, here's what the deceptive in deceptive reality refers to. The whole point of rephrasing the question that way, or the whole point of seeing the question that's being asked that way, is that Jetsun-Kappa is saying, look, the mind-only school's intention here is not just to ask some general question. They are going after the very guts or the very essence of the Madhyamika viewpoint. You know, they are not just asking some general friendly questions about their viewpoint. They're not even asking some general question about what their general belief system is. They are going after the very core or crux of the Madhyamika system. These two questions, phrased this way, represent an immediate and direct attempt to get to the core or the crux of Madhyamika philosophy. So now these questions, rather than being just a general question about what do you think existence is, what do you think non-existence is, these are aimed now, if you phrase them this way, as direct inquisitions into the real meaning of the whole Madhyamika system, to the very core of the Madhyamika system. Especially for the benefit of somebody who might have just walked in for the first time. We're on page 45. We're on the 8th line from the top. It starts out like de la dir, okay? And that's just to give you an idea of where we're going. We go down page... everything we've just described is reflected in the actual text here from page 45, 8th line where it says Dela, down to page 46, 4th line where it ends in Chiro. So that whole chunk there, that whole chunk of the original text by Jetsun-Kappa is reflecting that statement that I just made, that description I just made about what the real intent of the questions is.
뭐 추바지기 남자 잠지인자 뒤전에 였습니다. 단주에 뭐 추베 남자 잠시 공바시도다 뭐 추바지기 뭐랑 차시 대잠시라 공바시 규례마도 공바시에 단위에 딱딱 편차가 저는 이해요. 그래서 단주에 직송하는 오 대직송 제자로 추바지기 나의 차잠시지 세계에서 시에서 원하티로 추바데 가르리 스티나 군족 담바시비 직수르지 군족데 가르리 스티다 될려했다.
How do these two questions relate to the crux of the very crux of the Madhyamika system? You know, how can you say that these two questions, as they are reconstructed, relate to the very crux of the Madhyamika system? First of all, don't forget that the whole major belief of Madhyamika is to say, especially Prasangika, right, about a particular object, and then Geshe-la says, well, you know, let's just take something like a water pitcher, okay? Consider a water pitcher. The main thing that Madhyamika school wants to say about it is that it does not exist by definition. It does not exist ultimately. Then what does it mean, or what does that imply? It implies that any state of mind that's viewing it as existing that way is a mistaken state of mind. So really, the state of mind normally that's viewing a picture, and the state of mind normally that's being mistaken about a picture is what we call an erring perception, or something like that. So basically, the most crucial point here is that when you say this picture doesn't exist by definition, or this picture doesn't exist ultimately, what you're saying is this picture doesn't exist in the way that the normal perception of the picture thinks it does exist, and that normal perception is a mistaken perception. So it's not strange that they would answer the question, right, that was posed to them. What was the question? In this case, it's what did you think it meant to exist deceptively, or what did you think it meant to exist nominally, which is what the MindOnly school is asking the middle way school. And then rather than answering directly, they shoot off on this tangent and say, oh, well, there's this thing called deceptive reality, and the word deceptive in deceptive reality refers to a state of mind that misunderstands its object with regard to its ultimate nature. So it's not strange for them to take off on that tangent, because their whole shtick is that things don't exist by definition, and if you think they exist by definition, it's only that it seems to appear to exist by definition to a mistaken state of mind. But if you really check, the ultimate test is when you go looking for the thing that was labeled, when you go looking for the thing that received the label or the imputation, you'll never find anything, you know. And as you know, as an aside, right, my own aside, it means independent of your projections, right? So if you go looking for a thing that is receiving the label before you give the label, without the label, you never find the thing that gets a label. And that in their mind is what it means to be, if any state of mind doesn't think that, if any state of mind looks at the picture and thinks otherwise, that's what we call a deceived state of mind. And it is from that that we name deceptive reality, and that's why the middle way school started talking about deceptive reality and didn't directly answer the question, didn't directly address the question that the MindOnly school asked them, which was, what does it mean for something to exist deceptively? Okay. In this case, in the present discussion, we have to get both parties involved here. We have to let both parties say their thing, right? We have to let the MindOnly school has to say their thing, and then the middle way school has to give their answer. It's not like before when we kept saying, shut the door to Madhyamika, don't think about Madhyamika, don't mix them up. Now the case is totally different. You got to let the MindOnly school representatives come and speak up, and then you have to let the middle way representatives come and speak up, and they have to have an interchange here. So that's not improper here that they're having an interchange. Generally speaking, for you and me, people like you and me, it's almost impossible to accept the viewpoint that's being expressed here by the middle way people. Because the middle way people are coming and say, how do you establish the existence of a vase? How do you perceive a vase? Well, we describe the relative or the deceptive existence of the vase as meaning how it looks to a deceived state of mind, you know, how it looks to a mistaken state of mind. So here is the middle way school describing the very existence of something, or the vase itself, in terms of it being deceptive reality, and deceptive reality meaning it is a level of reality at which the mind which is establishing its very existence is mistaken in a sense. So for you and me, the idea that the middle way school would come up and say, well, you know, it's on the basis of a mistaken state of mind that we can even perceive the water pitcher at our level, it doesn't feel comfortable. And that's because we haven't really grasped the subtle meanings of what the middle way school means when they say that. We don't really have a very firm grasp of what they mean when they say that. Otherwise, if I just present it to you like that, if Geshe Tutorinjin sits in this class and says, okay, for you to perceive this water pitcher, or the very deceptive existence of the water pitcher is described by how it appears to a deceived state of mind, you would think it's kind of weird. It would feel weird for you to describe things that way, but that's actually how they describe them. And if you find it difficult to understand it, how it could be established, almost by a deceived state of mind, well, then you're right. Okay, it is difficult, and difficult for ourselves to get our minds around. It is, from that point of view, it's difficult. It is difficult. If you get some school coming up and telling you, the main existence of a water pitcher is derived from the way, is from the general appearance, or the general way in which it appears to a deceived state of mind, right? If you go around saying stuff like that, then it becomes a very natural thing to raise the issue, what do you mean by a deceived state of mind? If you say the whole existence of the water pitcher is posited on the way it looks to a deceived state of mind, then how are you describing, it's a very natural question now to go into and say, what do you mean when you say a deceived state of mind? If that's a natural question to go to somebody and say, well, what do you mean by a deceived state of mind? Then it becomes a very natural answer for the middle way to give, to say, hey, we'll answer you in terms of deceptive reality. In particular, we'll answer you in terms of the meaning of the first word in the phrase deceptive reality, which is deceptive, by which we mean the deceived state of mind. So that now you see that it's a very natural tangent that the middle way took off on to give the answer to the mind-only school.
민지다나 가르쳐고래서나 전담담바 세고래 송하다 다니에 아래 오늘 전담담바스나 간대지를 샤기마 스티리시네 좋아지다 파이 거로 초바지 남자 잠시를 본바 세고 길라서 야마르 다 티팅도 타쿠 팅도 가시 다 예예로 가래 요아르 세세나 전담담바지 요아래 식송하래 아래 안에 예 전담담바고 가래 있었다 내가 그게죠 남자 티때부 쉬우차 전담담 세지
And further, it becomes a very natural progression. Once you've said, oh, well, here's what a deceived state of mind is, right? And for someone to come up and say, oh, so you're denying that this thing has any existence from its own side, any natural existence, any existence by definition, right? And you say, right. So you're denying all that, even though that deceptive state of mind, the way it appears to deceptive state of mind is what defines it almost, you're describing that as some kind of mistake, right? As some kind of misperception about which we must block something or say that existence by definition doesn't really exist, right? And the Madhyamika says, right, that's what we mean. And then wouldn't it be a natural progression in such an exchange or a conversation with somebody for someone to say, well, but isn't anything there? Is there anything true that we can say about the vase? You say we can't say that, we can't say that, we can't say that. And you say that, it's just appearances or things like that. But is there anything that we can posit about the vase that we would feel comfortable about saying it is there? And then they say, oh yeah, there is something, ultimate reality. You can say the vase is not ultimate reality, but the vase does have a quality of, it does have ultimate reality. It has its own emptiness. And then from there you could take off and start talking about ultimate reality, you see, with this person. So it's a very natural progression in the natural thinking of a person for them to jump from the word deceptive or deceived state of mind in the expression deceptive reality, and then the opponent thinking or the other person in the exchange thinking, well, but is there something there which does exist? And you say, oh yeah, there is something that does exist about this picture that we can describe and say, oh, it really is there, and that's ultimate reality. So it's not strange in those terms, in that description of that progression of questioning, for the Madhyamika to go off on their other tangent, which was instead of describing what it means for something to exist ultimately, they jump off and start describing ultimate reality. And that's a very natural progression for them. So do you now you start to form a picture in your own mind of how the two questions posed by the mind-only school start to relate to each other closely, and more particularly why the Madhyamika school's response is not like disjunctive or crazy or just jumping off to nowhere. There's a logic to their madness, right? There's a reason why they went off on the answer that way. Does it start to form a picture in your mind of there's a relation between the two questions, and even more particularly that there's a logic to the to the middle way's rather odd way of answering? Okay, yeah. That don't chang do. Ani da rikpachi yosare.
Rikpachi jitu yosamare.
Na.
Rikpachi yosare na kosim tat charam di na la machi pachi kosare.
If you say there seems to be some logic, which is the way I said they say, I told him they say there seems to be some logic there. He says, actually what I said was, they see the relationship and there seems to be some logic. He says, if you're answering me, there seems to be some logic, then maybe you still have to examine it a bit. There is a logic here, there is a logical progression that has been followed here. There are millions of commentaries on this. This text is famous for being hard. This text is very difficult to understand and difficult to explain. And he says there are hundreds of commentaries running around on this thing, but to get this kind of a direct explanation of it is very difficult, and you won't be able to, you better fix it in your head right now. You better get it straight in your mind right now, because if you try to say, oh, later I'll go read some other commentaries or something, you're not going to get it. So he says, make sure you fix it in your mind. There is a logic to the tangent that the middle way school went off on. Roll the film forward, we'll keep going. Now we got a whole new category coming. Okay, we're on page 46. We're on the fourth line from the top. It says category number 2 has 2 parts. The first of the 2 parts is this: a demonstration that there are inconsistencies in the position of the others. Okay, in the belief system of the others. The others in this case are the consequence group of the Madhyamika school. It's the Madhyamika Prasangika, and again, this is a response by the mind-only school. The Prasangika had their chance to give their answers, and they gave 2 answers, right? And now the mind-only school is going to come and say, oh man, you tried to give those 2 answers. They don't make any sense at all. You have all these contradictions, so they're not going to be satisfied with it. This is the mind-only school's, what do you call it? Rebuttal to this attempted answer by the Madhyamika school. Okay, so they're going to say, we don't like your answer, and your answer has all these inconsistencies in it. Okay, that's going to be the first part. The second part here is the mind-only school will be counterattacked by the middle way school. And the middle way school will say, well, if our positions have those inconsistencies and contradictions in them, then so does yours. And they're going to start pointing out the mind-only school's inconsistencies and contradictions. And then the mind-only school in the same section will say, no, we don't have those. We don't have the same inconsistencies that you do. We don't. Those contradictions and those inconsistencies do not apply to us. So the second section is called, eliminating any response in which the Madhyamika school tries to say to the mind-only school that you have the same inconsistencies or similar inconsistencies and contradictions in your own beliefs. No, sir. So how's it going to start out? We're on the 7th line from the top of page 46, and they're going to say, well, now to start out with, we're going to, us meaning the mind-only school, we are going to refute your presentation of what it is for a thing to be kunzop, right? Kunzop means deceptive, right? And remember the middle way school gave their response by saying, here's what the deceptive in the expression deceptive reality refers to. They attempted to describe or to define what the deceptive in the expression deceptive reality refers to. Now you're going to get the mind-only school saying, your attempted identification of what deceptive means in the phrase deceptive reality is wrong, and here's why. And then they're going to pull out some ammunition from Dua, from Arya Sangha's briefer presentation. Okay, so they're going to start quoting Arya Sangha's abbreviation. Okay. That quotation is going to stretch from that 8th line from the top of page 46 down to the next to the last line of page 46 where it says Sung So. Okay, so that's going to be that whole chunk there is going to be why the middle way school's idea of what deceptive means in the expression deceptive reality is wrong.
Tela ticket that it was long to the channel to Carasana tell us the corner of the land you can buy in the Tanga catch a ditch in the ticket Jabachati. More need to make but taste to consume Damashi Suji consume the shore. Denver Chuba Maimpala, Denver Chuba Zinking, you lot of church answers. Can you land Jabara? They ended the Dinzingo church. I don't want you to make but taste. Dinzing call, let's make but taste. Dinzing call. Ngoba joba dang se ngoba joba se to pen ngoba joba se thanda de to pal ja da yinjing the se ngoba joba thang kunzu ji jule jwa yin ba de dam se de de yinjing the to pa thang o jule te ne ke ba re be ji reto ya mai bache khate se de de mai bache ngoba joba da thai khara to pa na chene kunzu tamshi yin ba de jule ke ba mai bache pa le ta ba to pe ta ba tamshi are yin ba ta tela len now here we go. This is kind of difficult. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8th line from the top on page 46. Dela means, by the way, now we're into a direct quotation from Arya Sangha's abbreviation. It says, Dela, with regard to that, meaning with regard to the way you middle way guys tried to explain the word deceptive, right? Digeche Jubajate, we have the following question to ask you, okay, which is, Ngoni to Mikpa De. Ngoni to Mikpa means, literally it means the
the perception of the essence, the very essence. What it means here is the tendency to think that something has a nature of its own when it doesn't have a nature of its own. So it's talking about the tendency to see things as truly existing, right? Which is the big enemy of all Buddhism, right? So it's talking about here, focusing on a nature means thinking that there's a nature, that things have their own nature when they don't have their own nature, okay? That ngomba japa here, which normally means some kind of good expression or a fine expression, here means the habit of topa. Topa means constructing, making constructs, the constructing state of mind, okay? So they have a question that they're going to ask these Madhyamika guys. Okay, when you talked about the habit of seeing things as truly existent or self-existent, okay, and that state of mind, are you talking about something which is a constructing state of mind which makes constructs about things, and which and which has come about through its own causes and conditions? Are you talking about something like that? Or Dudam, are you trying to say that no, it's different. It is both a constructing state of mind, and Kunzal Tam Shik means just itself a construction of the mind, okay, as opposed to coming from its own causes and conditions. So they're giving the Madhyamika guys two choices, okay? They say, okay, this Denzin, this state of mind that believes things exist self-existently or truly. Are you saying that it's some kind of imputing or labeling or constructing state of mind that does come from its own causes and conditions? Or are you saying it's that state of mind which is just itself a made-up thing and just itself a simple construct? Which one do you want to say it is? Okay, it's a question by the MindOnly school to the middle way school in response to how they describe deceptive and deceptive reality. Okay.
kuntup ji yule chunga yinba sena yudan kienla tenne kieba yinan ni yinan ni tangma tena karigo ten kati ngoja chunga yin kuntup chunga yinba ten karigo ten kati ngoba chibata kuntup yule chunga yinba kati ngoba chibata kuntup yule chunga yinan ni tena ngoba chibata kuntup che cha mirungo salabi ondu zane tokpa tang yudan kienla tenne chunga yinan ni eni Tope tava zambre se che c'è ma sce Muba jobata kunto zamshi karsa tendo wade kunto gijule tunga yimba de na ni kadi ngoba jobata kunto gijule tunga ena ngoba jobata kunto gijule tunga yimbe juda kele de tie so yoba mai no sidita rangi teni gi tubi yoba mare sine kecha de mala yamana demba tuba yoba mare sine kecha de mala yoba mai no she cham
now, if you give the first answer, okay, if you describe Denzin, which is the state of mind in which the tendency to think things really exist or truly exist, if you describe it as being a ngumba japa, meaning a fine expression, which here is a code word for the constructing state of mind, right? Dokpa. And if you further describe it as something which has come about through its own causes and conditions, you middle way people, then don't go telling us it's only a construct itself. Don't go around telling us it's just a construct of the mind or something like that. And don't go around telling us that it doesn't exist by definition, or it doesn't exist in reality, or doesn't exist truly or something like that. The minute you have agreed that the tendency to see things as truly existing is itself a constructing state of mind or a labeling state of mind, but B, it has come from its own causes and conditions, right? Then don't go around telling us it doesn't exist by definition. Then you can't say it's just a construct of the mind. You keep going around saying everything is just a projection, everything is just a construct of the mind. But now that you've agreed that the tendency to see things as self-existent itself is A, a constructing or a labeling state of mind, and then B, it comes from its own causes and conditions, please don't come and tell us that it doesn't have any existence by definition. Come on. Okay.
Kati ngoba jobata kunso samshi insi labki nani ngoba jobata kunso samshi nani ngoba jobata tokpa naji kunso samshi si gyule je mayimba che tokpa taba samshi nani tena si ta che tanga si che tanga su ne che tanga ani oh, she may per Mobajubatan, Kunsuchi, Mirumo, Teddy Dinzin Ko, Toba Tawasam is Ota Mebacha. I didn't think of Mebacha. Mechan, she may per was. She may didn't think of Mebachana. Zingi or sketch at Shesamajon. Dematro Zingi, Demar Madubal, Dematro Zingi or sketch at Shesamara, Meti, Zingi or Mepacha. Mepacha Garsano, Topa Tawa somebody. You let them give a Mare say, Mepacha. Same time,
and now the MindOnly school criticizes they further criticize the middle way school and say, okay, suppose you answer it the second way. Okay, we asked you, the first question was, is it this thing A and B, right? And now they're going to say, oh, we give you another choice. Do you want to say it's the second thing, A and B? What are the two parts of the second thing? Oh, is the tendency to see things as truly existing A, a labeling state of mind or a constructing state of mind, and then B, is it just made up by the mind? Is it not something that comes from its own causes and conditions, okay? Remember they gave him two choices. They blew him away on the first choice. Now they're going to blow them away on the second choice. Say, okay, let's say that you MindOnly school people, that you middle way school people say that what the tendency to see things as truly existing really consists of is a constructing or an imagining state of mind, A, and then B, it is itself only a construction, implying that it does not have its own causes and conditions. If you said that there could be a state of mind like that, then in effect what you're saying is that the tendency to see things as truly existing does not itself even exist. Because if you're going to go and say it's just a construct of the mind, implying that it doesn't have its causes and conditions, which is, by the way, the middle way would never agree to say that that's what it means. But anyway, then what in effect you're saying is that it doesn't come from its causes and conditions. If a state of mind didn't come from its causes and conditions, it could never exist. So then what you're saying is that the tendency to see things as truly existing itself could never exist. And then you know what? You'd get into that same old problem that you always have, you middle way people, because then that state of mind wouldn't have anything to be holding on to. So you could never even talk about a truly existing thing or a not truly existing thing, because if the state of mind that thought it truly existed when it didn't truly exist didn't exist, then how could you even talk about those things? So now you got yourselves into a corner where there doesn't even exist the idea of something existing truly, because the state of mind that thinks of that doesn't exist either, because it's just an imagination, and B, it itself is an imaginary thing, implying that it can't come from its causes and conditions. So according to the MindOnly school, if the middle way school came up and agreed that the tendency to see things as truly existing itself was only an imaginary thing or a construct, right? Then it wouldn't have its own causes and conditions. And then what could we say about it?
It didn't exist.
Didn't matter.
다 딘지고 매바 차송아 다매 딘지고 매바 차나 딘지고 줄에 깨와 임바 탄주 기산지 시기요
나네
다 줄에 깨와지 매바르스나 되니 줄에 깨와 강가로 콜라 랍초가나 줄에 깨와 강가로라 되니 코 줄에 깨와들이 요아마리 줄에 깨와들이 요아마리 줄에 깨와들이 다 강가로 지금 다 타마타마티 가르 매바 차송아 아 가리 가르치나
So if we denied this about if the necessary conclusion to be drawn from the supposedly middle way's position, which isn't their position, right? They would never say that the tendency to see things as existing truly doesn't have its causes and conditions. But what would the implication be if they did accept that? Well, then they'd have to say that about everything else, you know, that this didn't come from its conditions, this didn't come from conditions, this didn't come from its conditions, and then what would they be saying?
Nothing exists.
The Melatana, yeah. Be careful. Yeah, only Shenwangs, only things which has causes and conditions would have to be non-existent. Now, there are other things which do exist that really don't come from causes and conditions, but more particularly, they would be in effect saying that Shenwangs, meaning dependent things or cause things, didn't exist at all.
오, 제가 샤왕고 아마 이바스 가서 샘다 별로 샤왕고 아마 제 아마 뭐마
나니.
찬시 아마 제 콜라 쥐지 쇼서는 대패도 거는 군다래 쥐지 쇼 동도래 쥐지 쇼 신부고요 봐. 제가 샤왕고 뭐마 차디다 다시 콜 문다.
나니.
제가 개나 시메 빠르서 시스요.
Listen. So if you think about it, what is the linchpin of the Mind-Only School's presentation of things? You know, what is it which all other things revolve upon or revolve around? What is it? It's shenrongs. It's changing things. It's things that have causes. Because it's on the basis of changing things that we can describe constructs, and it's the absence of certain kinds of constructs which is their emptiness. So if you take away the whole linchpin of their whole system, which is changing things, then you've shattered their whole system, and everything becomes crazy or non-existent. So you must retain the foundation or the basis, and that's why it's such a serious thing when the Mind-Only school accuses the Middle Way school and says, therefore, you are wiping out the whole basis. Remember, basis, dakshi, can mean the basis which is labeled, or the basis of the imputation, or the basis on which we make constructs. The absence of certain constructs also being the basis with which we establish emptiness itself in the Mind-Only school. You middle way school guys are wiping out the whole foundation of everything. And that's why it says in the text, third line from the bottom, page 46, Dena shimebar, which means, well then, that's why we keep telling you, you middle way people, you're wiping out the very foundation. End of the third line from the bottom, page 46. Okay. line again. From the last line on page 46, from the beginning of the line, you will now get Jetsun Kappa's take on the quotation from the abbreviation of Master Sangha. Now, those of you who are taking good notes, if you start taking notes on what we're about to say, it might seem to be some kind of repetition or redundancy, because Geshe-la has already gone through and glossed the meaning of the words from Master Sangha's abbreviation. So just make a note in your notes that if it sounds a little redundant here, it's because Geshe-la already explained the quotation, and now you're going to have Jetsun Kappa giving his explanation of the quotation. Chiros. Jetsun Kappa's take on the quotation from the abbreviation of Master Sangha occupies the entire chunk from the last line of page 46 to the 7th line from the bottom on page 47 where it says Chiro. That whole chunk of text there is going to be Jetsun Kappa describing just about what we've just described. Come back to page 46, last line, okay? Which is where Jetsun Kappa begins his description of the abbreviation.
군속 대스다 덴바라 마주파 라 덴바라 주바 딩겐키 로코 덴진코 둠덴진코
맞아.
오 군속 난 그거만 줘봐야 줄라스 근데 딘진코 만약에 깨요 난 그거만 줘봐서나 박자지가 된다 대 영화도 되죠 이도 박자지 샤니바지 샤네 아니 신의 딘진코 깨와 나네 제가 난 그거만 줘봐 시다 디니야 두 박자지 제발라 때네 기비 로지래 봐. 나서 난 그거 좀 봐요. 게.
Okay. Page 46, last line. De Duni means Jetsun Kappa is now breaking in to the flow and saying, okay, you want to know what that means, that quotation from the abbreviation? We're talking about the state of mind which thinks that things have some nature of their own when in fact they do not have any nature of their own. He's describing the tendency to see things as truly existing. They see that things have a nature of their own when they don't have a nature of their own. It sees that things truly exist when things don't truly exist. And that state of mind is what we're going to be talking about. That state of mind is what the quotation is originally talking about. Then it says some very difficult phrasing on the top of 47, first line. Nanging ngumba jopa means the inner expression, okay? Again, it's the word expression being used as a code word, okay? This is now referring to bakchaks, okay? Inner expression refers to mental seeds. These mental seeds, if you remember, this is where the tendency to hold things as existing truly comes from. First there has to be a mental seed from your past life. And so this is now he's describing that tendency to think things truly exist, wherein one thinks that things have a nature of their own when they don't have a nature of their own, which is coming from mental seeds from before, from doing the same thing before, actually. Okay.
What did you find?
Yes, sir.
What to say? Tinde that didn't case, Tine. He's a rank Rindangami, you gave a Yinam, that I said to what I didn't matter.
No, sir. No, sir.
Rindangami, you did a village one Yinam.
Lani.
Hatela, Rindangamal, Dindingo, Yama, Diting, Dembatu, Dingo, Juma, Jiki, New Panchash, and Nimagishan, Dinding Chimachi, Dinding Yama, Nubari, Dinding Chimari, Dinding Chimari, Duxma, Dugu, Rangi, Rindangami, you gave a Yinam.
No, sir. So now from the first line and second line on page 47, you have it now taking the form of a question. Okay, so based on the idea that this tendency to see things as truly existing comes from mental seeds which existed before, are you now saying, Mr. Madhyamika, you know, are you saying now that this state of mind derives from a similar state of mind in the past? Does it derive from a cause which had a similar characteristics to it that happened in the past? In which case you're saying it does come from its causes and conditions.
What to say? That Yinamche. Namto Jepe, Namto Ki, Taba Tamshi Yin, that Yins and not
Nothing. Nothing. She is. Nothing.
What to say?
Nani. Geslat wants to point out that now they're asking the second half of the question. Remember the first half of the question was, oh, do you think it's a thing that comes from its causes and conditions? And they gave Madhyamika a chance to say yes or no. And then they said, or do you think it's a thing that doesn't come from its causes and conditions? Okay? And then Geslat wants you to make sure right now that you fix a problem with the text. Third line, page 47, last syllable should be yagiku yin na yin. Okay, it should be yin, meaning now he wanted to make sure you got that. Now he's going to continue with their second question.
What to say? That turned out for Unzo Japan, Indian Sumba.
Yes, sir.
Unzo Japan, Namto Gitava Tamsi, you were on it. Kendi didn't call any Gunzo beans. Momba Japan, Namto Gitava Tamsi said the Kaja Dum de Bodason, Topan Tazam in Sikima.
And then the second question being expressed, page 47, end of the second line, through to the third line. Or are you saying that this tendency to see things as existing truly is just some kind of mental construct, some kind of imagination, imaginary object or something like that? Which do you choose, Mr. Madhyamika? Okay.
What is it? Did did what did this one you understand?
Yes, sir.
On Japan, why the English?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The data might have a Kona, Jabapo.
Yes, sir.
Top at that. Stay and put it on Jaba, Silko Tagia, Karisha, City. Mova Jaba, Karisha, City Tagia. Starting. Mova Joba and Jula, ask you are one. Mova Joba and Jula, Mova Joba Karisha, Top Barisha.
Lani.
They understand Mova Japan, data, Jamatansi.
Yes, sir.
Can they Mova Joba cause the dancing cause? Mova Joba, Namto Gitava Tami is a dancing cock. Top at Tabata in Siki. Data Jamna, Amdi, the data.
There's another problem with the text here. And again, you don't change it, you just mark it. Okay, this one you just mark and you write it off to the side, okay? Third line, in the middle of the third line, there's a genitive particle, which is an agiku e, right? Connected to jepa, jepe, right? So in the middle of line 3. If you retain this genitive particle there, which is like an apostrophe S in English, right? The whole meaning of the sentence gets changed and it becomes a difficult sentence and doesn't make much sense. A lot of the texts, the Amdo editions, where you see it, they will not have this genitive particle there. And just a general aside of my own, the various editions of Jetsun Kappa's works are wildly different. Okay, you get many particles like this that are hanging around that are different between different versions of the printings. So he says, Geshe-la says, if you take that one out, it's a lot more comfortable, because then what you're saying is, kunsopa means that thing which is deceived. Ngombar jepa, true expression, right? Expression, meaning here again a code word for the tendency to see things as truly existing. Okay, very difficult. A code word for the tendency to see things as truly existing, which here and in the text is called expression or true expression or fun expression or something like that. If you are saying, oh Mr. Madhyamika, that deceptive state of mind which holds things to be truly existing is itself an imaginary object, right? Is itself just something which is a projection or a construct of the mind. See, that's how the sentence comes out if you drop the apostrophe S there. Okay, and if you don't drop it there, you're in trouble. And Geshe-la says other editions don't have that there. So you might want to make our custom is to make a mark under it, and then off to the side make your note about it. Okay.
다 당보다나 세지 다리 여기 다리. 근데 이 교니 팀, 낭세니 팀 당보콜라. 아이나 당보다나 유제베 여바마인 시차 미루모. 한 네가 시차 미루는 여바마인 세지면도 많이 봐. 누가 그래 나는 여바마인 세만도 여바 세지 가리가리 있나 세야보나요. 다 정말 어떤 것이 시바니 여바마인 세 지당은 여바마인 세더라 마고와 체. 시바니 전담으로 여바마인 세다 말라. 유래 깨바이나 딘딘고 쳐제 유래 깨바이나니 아니 전담으로 여바마인 그래도 전담으로 여바마인 아니 되니 여바마인 세기도와
Now we're on to the fourth line, page 47. Dambotana means if you Madhyamikans take the first choice that we presented you, which is what? To say that state of mind comes from its own causes, or in more specifically, it comes from from the seed of a previous state of mind that was similar. Okay, so if you are saying in effect that this tendency to hold things as truly existing comes from a similar state of mind or a cause which is concordant with it, right? If you say that, then don't go around saying it doesn't exist, right? The root text of the abbreviation at this point, which is 4 lines from the bottom of page 46, says no more than don't go around saying it doesn't exist. Okay? And then Jetsun Kappa is trying to clarify for you what that means. And that he does towards the end of line 4 on page 47. Meaning, don't go around saying it's something that doesn't exist ultimately. Okay? Because actually the middle way school didn't go around saying that they didn't exist, right? That state of mind didn't exist. All the middle way school said was, it doesn't exist ultimately. But the MindOnly school says, okay, look, if you're going to say that this state of mind that holds things as truly existing is a thing that grows from a seed which is produced from a similar state of mind in the past, then don't you go around saying it doesn't exist ultimately. Okay? And where they say don't go around saying it doesn't exist ultimately is on line 5, page 47.
늘 전담도 여매서 값이 미치다는데 여매 담는 고주와 담으로 여 담에 그거 알겠지. 그래서 그거에 지당 탄주와 당 심자문이 뭐 간다 접받듯다 지요 뭐 그래서 접받잖이요. 다 가는 요하를 지기 전담발이 지기 전담발 요 땅이네 말이지. 대표기 요다 여매 담 지당 여매 담 가지고 전담을 여매. 네. 장mol라마 동거 지익송 안에서 마세바지 파게 그게 찍히지. 지금라 탄주에 와마리 슬랍기 와마라. Nama Yamari is the catch at the lava in the Tinishin is in the catch at the Malala. Ungidu Mato, part of it, and them do that, part of it, and you are. And them to make a care land, Chiri Mechi, Mamerichi,
and the next few lines, Jetson Kappa gives his rationalization for saying, hey, look, they're not just saying to the middle way school, come on, don't go saying nothing exists, right? It doesn't just mean that. What they're trying to say, the mind-only school in the abbreviation is saying to the middle way school, don't go around saying nothing exists ultimately, right? And they must be saying that for two reasons, okay? The first reason is that the whole argument between the mind-only school and the middle way school is not some argument about whether things exist or not. I mean, generally speaking, a mind-only school guy and a middle way school guy are going to agree, you know, this thing exists, this thing doesn't exist, you know, this exists, this exists. It's not a question. The confrontation here is not between two people who have different ideas about whether something exists or not. The question is, do things exist ultimately or not? One school is saying, of course they exist ultimately. And the other school is saying certain things exist ultimately. And the other school is saying, nothing in the universe exists ultimately, okay? So obviously when it says, don't go around saying things don't exist, what the mind-only school means is, don't go around saying things don't exist ultimately. That's the first reason why Jetson Kappa feels it's necessary here to tell you, hey, look, they're talking about ultimately here, not just about don't go around saying things don't exist. The second point is that where are we taking off from? You know, what was it that someone said that triggered this fight, you know? Well, it was when the middle way school people came along and said, by the way, nothing exists ultimately, right? So if that's the takeoff point, if the takeoff point is if the whole argument started by somebody saying, nothing exists ultimately, then when the opponent comes up and says, stop saying things don't exist, what they mean is, stop saying things don't exist ultimately. Those are two reasons why the phrase, stop saying things don't exist, must mean here, stop saying things don't exist ultimately.
Dindeji la pimba, Tani va kola kasana, ko dinzing de topa tamda, ngoba cheba se topa tamda, Kora topa taba tamni, rangi tenima, o tuksi lapki nani, batana ni, topa taba tamdu, mirung te, se da topa taba tamdu, dinzing ko topa taba tamdu, mirung se, karasana, te sana, mirung te, dopi shi mepi chipte, se ta te karasana, che tamje topa taba tamni, sta lapsa mara. Marakarasena, Tashi Shawan, Mebacha, Sikran Land, and Mebacha Karasena, Dinting could Jule Kena, Rangitani Matu, Demba Matu, Slapso, tell Lama Kiri, but the Kine, Jule Kiri, Mokanga, Shawan, Kanga, oh, Jule Kiri, Demba Maru, Rangitani Madu, Teacheta, Shawan, Mebacha, Tashi Shawan, Meba in the church of the top at our top from. For a never child. Children of the top of system mena, Dinzing go top at our system. Never child.
Now we go to line 7 on page 47. And so Nibbutana means, okay, let's say you Madhyamika guys answer the second way. Yeah. The tendency to see things as existing truly itself is only a figment of the imagination or construct or projection, okay? In that case, then it cannot be true that it is just something which is topetata, means just a projection of your mind, because if it were, then the thing that is being projected onto would not exist either. Meaning, the tendency to the topetam dobeshi me the cup dear dobeshi say the denzin kolana.
Mari, denzin kola kyu should the papa
nani. The dobish the cup dealer dobeshi maybe chip test and
dobeshi means Shawan Mindu.
Then Dopeshi means again, Jetson is explaining the basis or the foundation as it appeared in page 46, the third line from the bottom, meaning that if you follow this logic to its necessary conclusion, meaning if you say that the tendency to think that things exist truly itself is something which is a figment of the imagination and doesn't come from causes and conditions, then in fact what you're saying is that if it applies to one example of a changing thing, which that state of mind is, then it would have to apply to all changing things. And then the whole basis on which we label things, the whole basis on which we impute things would be removed, because shenwangs, changeable things or changing things, would be removed themselves. So you can't say, he's just repeating what he said before, and he told you it would be a little redundant, right? Jetsun Kappa is saying, if you say that the tendency to hold things as truly existing is itself something which is only a construct of the mind or a projection, then what you're saying is that all other changing things would also have to be that, and then there would be no basis on which to make constructs or to label things, and then again the other two groups would just collapse. Okay, you can't do that.
This one?
Nangin.
Hako, Shawame, Dobishi, maybe chip this, Dobishi, never go, happy Jagan.
Nangin, that's all.
Chip this. Also, Tangoba, Topa Tabasamina, and the Dinzingo Topa Tabasamina, and the Shanam that take you with that, Dobishi down. Shanam down, Suzatini, or Mogo Chanda, so young, Topa Tabasam, Miskana Lapacho. Then Rangi Penny Marukala, Tension on the Chapo, Shanam Yati.
And it's from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, from line 9 from the bottom on page 47. Well, I'll tell you why. All the foundation of our whole system would collapse because, and then he's going on to give more reasoning. So the MindOnly school is showing you the domino effect of your beliefs. You know, if you believe this, then this is what would happen. The whole basis for everything being asserted or making constructs about everything, which is shenwang, dependent things, would collapse because means if the tendency itself to see things as truly existing, which is one kind of changing thing, if you started to say about that it was only a construct or a projection, then you'd have to say that about all other changing things in the world also, and then the whole basis upon which we say things are constructs, the whole basis of emptiness, the whole basis of everything else would collapse. So you can't say that. If something breaks down with regard to the tendency to see things as truly existing, they would also have to break down for all other changing things. No, sir. Gane. No, sir. No, sir.
That can you turn up with the course, again, can you land you are, and Kunzum Jing Colata, Kunzum Shivik, send them the last one. I turned up with the turn up the Bacola Carisha, share them the right thing you might do a call, turn up the body's land, that did to me to start a point. Or Duana, Casa Duana, Sonia, and Nabatella, Duana, Sonia, Chetatini, a long time.
We're now on the 7th line from the bottom of page 47. So the MindOnly school, in their own minds, right, have successfully denied that what the middle way school people said, how they identified the meaning of the word deceptive in the phrase deceptive reality. They've already blown that away. So okay, so you know that has to be wrong, you guys. You middle way guys, you don't have that right. You know, you didn't get that right. Now they're going to go on to blow away the second half, which is where the middle way school said, here's what it means, ultimate existence, okay, ultimate reality. Here's what ultimate means in the expression ultimate reality. Don't forget that for a middle way person it means nothing exists by definition. Nothing exists ultimately. Okay, they take ultimate reality to mean nothing exists ultimately, nothing exists truly, nothing exists by definition. Now you know that the MindOnly school has to go after that. So here's where in the abbreviated presentation of Arya Sangha, you're going to get the middle way school's attack on the middle way school's presentation of what ultimate means in the expression ultimate reality, or what ultimate reality. Remember they gave an example of what ultimate reality was, and in that way they described ultimate reality. So they're going to now attack that, and Jetsun Kappa is going to start out with a direct quotation from the abbreviation of Arya Sangha.
What? 사람 가지 굳이 이렇구나. 셀라 디게지 줘봐 차대 가서 델라 디게지 천한데 봐 지치나 강미 받게 매번 세장 줘봐 차오. 아파 단주와라 샘다에 파티를 세단 덴바스 단주와 가는 거. 사실은 덴바 세단 되네요. 가는 소리게 시에바 여게 그거는
네.
단주와라 야바. 오, 강 단주와라 가는 세상 지치나 되는 거라이나. 되다 보면 네가 집에 천한데 봐 지치나 유대한 관계 있어. 지치나는 유대한 관계 지기 있어. 관계 지기 강미밭에 매번 세장 줘봐 차오. 그 가르네서나 라기 생이 두바디 요 말에서 라고 라기 생이 두바 매받고 라기 생 분바다 불러서는 분비팅도 라기 생이 두바 매받고 분비팅이 단담 담바래 슬라바 다 분비팅도 라기 생이 두바 매세데 가르쳐 버려서나 분바 때버때 비팅도 분비팅도 때버때 라기 생이 두바 징기 요arte 이나 그 징바도 요 말에서 오 진짜 지체나 강미밭에 진짜 린징키 분배팅도 라기 생이 두바 림바고 매비 주된 시에쇼사 강미밭에 매바이 진짜 매비 주된 시에쇼 파티
그랑이 미규데 매비 주된 키쇼
오 린징 다 그게 대송상 분배팅이 돈이고 전담 대바고 오 진짜 분바 대바르 린징 그 짐바 낭신체네 매바고 분배팅이 전담 대바에 실내 저는 문진 거라 대체돼서 하셈담배 공바콜라미네 랑기 생이 두바 징이로 그 짐바타르 매바고 가르레
나서
대 뒤바고 다 참네 나서 대 단주에 거다 요 말을 가르잖아 콜로 녹시에라 신지로 공부 이비 체르다 또 녹시에라 저도 그 짐바타도 간대요 단주 수야
So now we have a taunt almost by the MindOnly school. Okay, they're saying, okay, Tserandemba Chichu. Tserandemba generally has a lot of different meanings. Here, Geshe-la glosses it as meaning, anybody with life. Okay, meaning, okay, you guys, you Madhyamika guys, you people, okay, that have life. Okay, Chichir means what is the reason you would choose to give us? Okay, literally Chichir just means why or why for, and here it means what reason do you want to give us for saying that. That thing which it thinks is there, okay? Meaning what? Meaning the tendency to see things as truly existing holds on to a certain thing. What is that thing? According to the middle way school, it's that anything could exist by definition. Okay? It's the non-existent thing called anything existing by definition. And that's what, when that state of mind thinks it sees something when nothing is there, right? It's looking at something which is not existing by definition and which holds it to be existing by definition. So now the middle way, the MindOnly school is coming up to the middle way school and saying, when the tendency to see things as truly existing looks upon things that according to you don't exist by definition and things that, and things that they do exist by definition, for what reason is the thing it thinks it sees not there? Okay, for what reason is the thing it thinks it sees not there? Tell us why. And then Geshe-la says, the middle way school is going to go on to say, well, because it can't exist like that. It could never exist like that. It never did exist.
이게지 신지로 대 저바치 신지로 대 신진 거래 여바되었담 언제 매바지 매 담라 말이 랑기 테니기 주바 여스 랍기 바 신지로 뭐고 거래 신고 랑기 테니 마주 랍기 마주라 야만나 데바라 춥스 랍기 데바라 마주라 타고 랑기 테니 주바 데바도 많이 집어도
라인
오 매바지 어디지 파치
line 5 from the bottom, page 47. The answer of the middle way school, right? The question posed to them was, why do you think that the thing it thinks it sees isn't there? And then the middle way school comes along and says, because it's a mistaken state of mind. That's why the thing it thinks it is there isn't there. That's why the thing it thinks is there doesn't exist, because it's a mistaken state of mind. So by definition, what it thinks is wrong and isn't there. Okay, so that's what it means when we say the thing it thinks it sees isn't there, because it's a mistaken state of mind. We told you that. Okay, that's what it is. It's a mistaken state of mind. And then the MindOnly school comes right back and says, are you saying then that it exists or it doesn't exist? Okay, are you saying then that that mistaken state of mind exists or it doesn't exist? Now, do they mean exists or doesn't exist, or do they mean something more? They mean something more, meaning, does it exist in an ultimate way, or doesn't it exist in an ultimate way? Because again, they're not just going to come up to the middle way school and say, oh, duh, do you think that state of mind exists or doesn't exist? What they mean is, do you think, now, next question for you middle way guys, do you think that that thing exists by ultimately, or doesn't exist ultimately? Or you could say in their school, exists truly or doesn't exist truly? Or exists by definition or doesn't exist by definition. Okay, all the same thing for the middle way, for the MindOnly school. Now they're throwing the question back to the middle way. Oh, do you think that mistaken state of mind exists ultimately, truly, by definition, or not?
딩딩고 추진 수송아 딩딩고로 두고 딩딩게 여바되다 왠지 여바되 개인이지
나는
다 당복하라 여바되나 다티 여 메시지 다가 시당 있는 말이야 당기 팀이 당 야면은 아 딩딩고 랑기 테니기 두 연하니 제다 두 연하 타처 탐제 랑기 테니 마두바 뒤처 강다 가는 그 딩기 똥이 다 남자마 좀 안해
나는
인생 깨짜리 쉬어서라마 통아 인생 거 테니 두 연하 인생 랑기 테니 마두바 인생기 테니 똥이 레지 용도 배다 말 인생 지사라마 통아 다리 빠치고 두고라 오 디스야 콜라 가티 연하니 얘나 스피하다 애상가 얘나 최탐지기 뭐니 매반님 저다 봐서 최레리 띵도 뭐니 매세더랑기 테니 매받고 최티기 돈이래 최티랑기 테니 뭐 최티기 돈이래 최티랑기 테니 뭐 최티 돈이래 진짜 말아 아니 딘딩 딘도 스케치 치에서
further answered by the MindOnly school, second line from the bottom, 47, starting with Kelte. Oh, so let's see. Did you middle way school guys? Was it that you wanted to say it did exist or it didn't exist? Okay, what is it? What is the example we're talking about? The tendency to see things as truly existing. So they asked the question: do you think it exists or it doesn't exist? You know, what do you middle way guys think? And Geshe-la reminds us that, of course, they're not just asking, does it exist or it doesn't exist. They're asking, does it exist ultimately or doesn't it exist ultimately? Now, if you say it does exist ultimately, Kelte Yuna, which is down in the last line of 47, well, then what you must be saying is that when you went around describing, oh, the emptiness of this thing is the fact that it doesn't exist ultimately or by definition or truly. And that's the meaning of emptiness for these things and these things and these things and these things and everybody else, everything else in the universe, right? You middle way guys already said that when we talk about the emptiness of things, we're talking about the fact that they are devoid of any quality of existing ultimately. They don't have that quality. So your whole presentation of what it means for every object in the universe to be empty doesn't mean anything now that you've accepted that the tendency to see things as truly existing itself as a state of mind exists ultimately. So you guys, your whole school collapses if you start to agree that the tendency to hold things as being true is itself something which exists ultimately. You can't answer that, because then you can't go around to every single thing in the universe and say the opposite of it existing ultimately is its emptiness. The absence of it existing ultimately is its emptiness. And going around to every single object and saying, this is what its emptiness is, this is what Yongdup is, this is what its emptiness is. You can't go around saying that anymore. So you can't be accepting that that state of mind is something that exists ultimately. Okay.
인생 그 띵도 아니 인생고 랑기 ten이 주연아 저 또 와라 그 랑기 ten이 주연아 그 랑기 ten이 뭐도 인생 그 띵이 돈이 말해 다 돈이 레스사 말해 다 텐 쓰면은 저 강나 가이나 코랑 랑기 ten이 뭐도 코레 띵이 돈이 말해 세고 가서 인생을 랍 저거를 현다 랍 저거 말해 쓰야 말 이거 쓰야 말 와서 샘다게 당겨 인생을 띵이나 찍빠 로고로 와 땅땅이야 그래 저던 데랑 생이 뭐 두어도 그 띵이 돈이 세 간담 대비 천시고 느낌이 와 다들 사람이 나를
So you can understand the logic of the MindOnly school's objection, right? They're saying, you know, if you took any particular object in the world, even if it were the tendency to see things as truly existing, and you said that that one thing exists ultimately, meaning that it's not such that it doesn't exist by definition, right? As you middleweight guys have been saying all this time. If you can say that about that one object, which is that one state of mind, then wouldn't you have to say it about all other objects? Is it fair? Is it justice to take all the objects in the world and say, oh, this is true about the tendency to see things as truly existing, and then it's not true about all the other objects in the universe, especially all the other changing objects? Is it like fair for the middleweight school to say, oh, this one is different, you know? This one exists ultimately, but nothing else exists ultimately. Could you describe the emptiness of one object, meaning the tendency to see things as truly existing itself? Could you describe its emptiness as its lack of having anything which exists, of having any quality of existing by definition? And could you describe it and say, that's not true about this one object, and then go around and say, oh, but it's true of all these other objects? You know, you can't blame the mind-only school for demanding consistency of the middle-way school people, you know. You can't go around saying that this one object, its emptiness is described differently than the emptiness of all the other objects. No, you can't say, you middle-way school people, that the tendency to see things as truly existing is itself something that exists ultimately. Otherwise it breaks down with everything else. Do you think it's fair to take out that object and that dancing can you but shouldn't love goodness.
Oh, they can have been fill up so now. Tini, the chair time, the rangi thing, the tandam, then be changing the shaggy.
Having said all of that, if the middle way school went and said about the state of mind that thinks that things truly exist, if they said, oh, well, but that thing, you can't say about that thing that it doesn't exist by definition. It does exist by definition, right? Having said that, could the middle way school come along and say, oh, and by the way, the primary, or here's a good example, or here's a primary example of what ultimate reality means, right? That's where they started out. You know, could they come along and say, hey guys, here's what ultimate reality means, having just made this exception? Chokmane, that he did not demonstration is that did she can answer that chicken the can So it's a real sweet argument on the mind-only school, right? That's
강미파테 원이 내도시 참 미루고 어때 다 두두에나 계속 들어와서 하디 전다도 가르치기로서는 같이 매나니 있는 딘진코 나 딘진코 매세 매samla 말해 랑기 생이 좀 매나니 다 딘진코랑이 생이 좀 매나니 딘진 싸니네 매파차 나네 다 저랑 이야기 전담대비 천시샤 용디자 간다고라래 본바콜라 제지 본바 rangi teni matubate pumbe toni res lapsong anjure teson de karresena pumba rangi teni tubatingi loku pumba deba tubatingi lokore ku dimba tartu mepa ko ku tengi toni res nani he keche shesa nagmare me karresena ku dimba tartu sena ingen koram ingen koram do suzi ingen dimba ingen ko tani ni me barwa ani ku dimba tartu yamare
now they go after the second part. Page 48, first line. Kelte menani means, well, let's suppose you change your tune. And now you say that the tendency to hold things as truly existing itself doesn't exist. Now, do they mean simply doesn't exist here? No. They mean, if you say that the tendency to hold things as existing truly doesn't exist ultimately, right? Then what happens? Well, mind-only school says to middle-way school, if you say that that tendency to hold things as existing truly doesn't exist ultimately, then what you're saying is it doesn't exist. Okay? It's equivalent to saying it doesn't exist. Okay? And if you say that the tendency to hold things as truly existing itself doesn't exist, then when we go about describing ultimate reality, we have a problem. Why? Because when we go around describing ultimate reality, we go around saying the ultimate reality of things is their emptiness. Emptiness means they are devoid of a self-existent thing or a thing that exists by definition. Well, who said it existed? Who thought it existed by definition in the first place? Oh, there's this tendency to hold things as existing truly. Okay, so then the guy says, well, wait a minute, you just said that didn't exist. Okay, so you middle way people cannot describe ultimate reality. You can't even speak about an example or a classical example of ultimate reality, because you're going to get in trouble through the back door, right? Because when you describe what it means for something to be ultimate reality, you have to say it's the emptiness of things. What emptiness of what, pray tell? Oh, the fact that they don't exist by definition. Who said they existed by definition? Oh, there's this tendency to think of them as existing by definition even though that they don't. Oh, and what tendency would that be? Oh, that's the tendency to hold things as truly existing. Oh, the one you said didn't exist ultimately, right? Yeah, the one you said didn't exist, because if something doesn't exist, it can't exist at all. And then the middle way school people are stuck. Okay, so this is the MindOnly school's way of getting to the middle way school and showing them why they're wrong if they would say, oh, that tendency to exist, to say that the tendency to think that things exist truly is itself not something which exists ultimately. Okay.
단들이 인딩 숨바들 현실 시험기 인딩 숨바들 뒤에니 최대다라 랑기 생긴 쪽이란 전리신도세 걔네 고수 쟤네 네 선생님의 시에도 됐다나 들이 군수도 이번에 독지 마 진지 시바데미도 니한 선생님이 따마시면 따먹어 버려 다시 그다음 이 군다 요원들이 오다래 니네야 집 숨축 꿈이야 집이 인딩 축과 되나도 올라왜 걔네 시에도 시와 어디 봤더니 여기에 두와나는 시에 아비 깨체시고 산지 정글로 통과하고 치면마 가세요 땅 그런 자기들이 기회나 나한테는 막 같이 빠래 땅에 기회고 그러다 가라 셀이 좀 찍고 찍지 않죠.
This whole thing that I just presented is found, or is actually stated in the book, starting with the 3rd line of page 48 and continuing to the 6th line from the bottom of page 48. That whole chunk of text there is where Jetsun Kappa in effect says what I just said the abbreviation was saying. Okay, so now again we're going to get something that might seem a little redundant. Now you get Jetsun Kappa explaining the wording of the abbreviation in the way that I just finished explaining it. So in your notes, don't get confused. Later when you read them over again and say, Geshe Tutu was saying the same thing twice. Now it's actually Jetsun Kappa's own, in his own words, explaining what Geshe-la just explained. Okay. Nothing.
뒤편이 최대다라 랑기 테니키 투비 랑제 민신도 개매지 지다를 읽대 대란이 대단히 체면의 빛으로 따셈담에 단주어 시왕강 이바텔라 자나리 시왕강 이바텔라 최대다라 세디 시왕도 용도니까 키는 되게 오 최대다라 랑기 테니키 투비 랑제 민신도 최강 시왕다 용도 뒤지 강 이바텔라 랑기 테니 투바고 때 나랑 하 고기 도와 그 남 누가 여바 하 고기 라 민신도스 여바데 하 고기 라 네스 카라가 끼마 그래서 근데 라포나 랑기 테니 투바 하 고기 로티 크라나 네그래 봐 텔라 계단이 세네 네비시로 다 들렸어 쌤담에 파
now we'll go up and start explaining Jetsun Kappa's explanation, right? Line 3, page 48. Duni. Now the meaning of those words from the abbreviation is the following. Chudidagla, these things, okay, these things. Geshe-la says you can take it as shenwangs, as dependent things, and you could just as well take it as emptiness or totality as it's expressed in the middle mind-only system, okay? These things, which any fool could look at and see they exist by definition, okay? So the mind-only school is, like saying, come on, anyone, you just have to open your eyes and you can see that these things exist by definition, and to go around and say that those things don't exist by definition, well then, and then he's going to go off. So, the mind-only school is starting off kind of hot and saying, open your eyes, anybody can see these things exist by definition. Okay? Nothing.
홀로 록시인데 홀로 투시에라 그 록시에라 팅 하나 가만히 그래
음악을 팔라고요.
음악에 둘래
That's And the Madhyamikans, line 5, page 48, respond and say, hey, what kind of objection is that? You know, that doesn't touch me. That doesn't even touch me. Why? It's a mistaken state of mind. You know, what you say is open your eyes and look at anything and you can see that it exists by definition. You know, yeah, you do. And it's wrong. And that's a mistaken state of mind. So yeah, that doesn't touch me, man. It doesn't hurt me any. You know, means that doesn't touch me. You know, that argument doesn't do anything to me. You know.
주바티에서는 빈빈코 랑기 tenji 요나 그 랑기 tenji 주바 이나 잖아 그 랑기 tenji 주바 이나 그 랑기 tenji 마주보 그 tenji 돈이 많이 봐 차송아
네
어디 콘트 랑기 tenji 주바고 돈이 랑기 tenji 마주보 그 tenji 돈이를 샤기 미두나 최어 강가로 찍발 등에 좋았다는 편하고 왔고 오다티 순간 주바티 랑기 tenji 요나니 돈이 매파 전담 대발에 시니 최어 담질라 랑기 tenji 마주보 전담 대발에 시에 미루스 샥사야만 아스타이 친송아스 매나니 시디다 로 추바코 랑기 tenji 주바 마이나니 기니 로 추바고 짬이 침바티 그 짐바리 야 말이지 깨짜 버시는 딩게거나 민두가 어때 매나니 추비치 미까 메데토 메토 예바테 메데토
So then the MindOnly school says, don't forget that the middle way school said, that doesn't touch me because that state of mind is mistaken. So now the MindOnly school is going to go back to their old refrain, basically. And they're going to say, oh, you say it's a mistaken state of mind, right? Pray tell, does it exist by definition or not? Okay, so remember they're going back to their old argument. You know, us MindOnly guys already explained to you that if you answer us, oh, that mistaken state of mind does exist by definition, then there would have to be one thing in the world about which we could say it does exist by definition, right? So then, I'm sorry, yeah, if you said it does exist by definition, then there'd be one thing in the world that you would have to say when you describe its emptiness. Meaning, when you describe the emptiness of that mistaken state of mind, you couldn't no longer say it is the fact that it is not something which exists by definition. Okay, its voidness, or the fact that it's devoid of any quality of existing by definition. Right? You couldn't say that anymore about this particular state of mind if you say it does exist by definition, and then your whole idea of emptiness gets blown away. You know, this is not what emptiness means about this one thing. Oh, but here's what emptiness means about everything else. And then you couldn't go along and start giving us classical examples of what it means to be ultimate reality. Because with this one example, your idea of what ultimate reality is was just blown away. Okay, so you can't say it does exist by definition, this supposedly mistaken mind that you're talking about. And suppose now that you did say that it didn't exist by definition, right? Then we get into that same old problem. We already explained it to you. We already went through it with you middle way guys, that if the mistaken state of mind itself were not something that existed by definition, then we couldn't say that it existed at all. Then the mistake that it was supposedly making wouldn't be existing at all, and then there wouldn't be any mistaken state of mind anyway. Okay, so either way you're caught, middle way people. Okay? That's it. That's it.
밑에도 다 정말로 정말 좀 단다 고향 송을 이리양 전담도 예미기 땅바 차고 매장 대라시 땅방감 알리 때마 쪽 공는 게 나서 단단 가서 직시해 버리면 립 고마도 고 직시해만 이게 다게 얘기는 직시해 전화 직시는 치마로 다 정글라면 동가 심이 뒤 되는데 직시해 그 쓰는 게 양조 다 나서 그러나 다기 얘기 뒤는 뭐야 받아 정말로 또에 동업심 송당거리면다 도시 카도 립기도
나서 Geshe wants to make a confirmation process right now, okay? We've been through an explanation of the quotation from the abbreviation already. And then we got Jetsun Kapa's take on that same wording from the abbreviation. So if you took your personal notes and you took our explanation on the left and ran down the left column with that explanation that we did when we got to the actual quotation from the abbreviation. And then you took the way we've explained Jetson Koppa's explanation of the same words and ran them down parallel down your notes. Would they match up or not? Okay. We just want to do a reconfirmation process here. I just want to check that, so before we go on to the next phrasing of the text, I just want to compare those two versions that you have there and make sure that they concord with each other. In your own mind, does it concord? Is it okay? I just wanted to make sure it was the same in your own mind, because if it wasn't the same in your own mind, there'd be a problem. But now that you say it is the same, we can go ahead. If someone, theoretical example, were just saying, oh yeah, those two are the same, without really understanding that they were exactly the same, then there might be a problem. But I'm sure that's not the case.
What did it? That did it. Did you answer? Turn down the image that I got the Tangan in Dubai in the from two. Yapatina. Did you turn down the image? Tapachago, Mejang, dressing. Tapangama, Hala, the Shiato, the Jangola, which is so it is. Tan did you answer Carresana, Tandam Debbie, Winzing Quota, Tagi, Yaku, Debbie, Winzing Quota, Chick down, Winzing Quota, Tandam Debbie, Winzing Quota, never. He now put up the Winzing Quota, Kolaya, Yagi, Dinzing, which lived here. Yagi, do not do Karimbana, Yagi, Chinch, Ya, Chinch, and she to kill, she to be Indian men's to Dibatana.
That's so.
Ela, the Gage Jabati, Nibati, Nobajabatam. Kundu Jule join, but third time, I don't know about the Kundu, I don't know about the Kundu Jule, and I'm about the Kundu Jule join, but Yobama, she's a mirror. Yobama said, turn on my information. I don't know about the Kundu, she may pay over to the Kundu Samiru, Tapat shed one. Here, trouble, he tapat shed the carrier, Dinzing course. Ha Dinzing course. Jule join chair, took the reto, top better. Jule join any Dinzing will turn number two, turn number two again, turn number eight. Then go rank thing to gain race, not what it is. Dinzing go, Jule join my image, top better, then that Dinzing never charge to race. That's it, me shares what I do. Here, trouble, and that dinner Dinzing left from us, and then they will go for la. Dinzing, they were to a Zimba, but Nebati, and then Debares, one at Dinzingo Yarea. Dinzingo Yamaresena, and Dinzing Zimba to mention the Mashi didn't want to do us. He can't take it Dinzing call. Julia Chuari, top and Tawa some days. Sketch a Yagi the trouble, she going in sort of charge. He is the Yagi top of Dinzing to say she was loving. Holiday around to Simginala, Shama telling you, Tapa Magia and Nayan, Dinzing Julia Chiabareto, top at our time. Julia Chiaba Inani, turn Tampa Truba. Then the castle turn them to ranking to gain charge. Top at our ranking with the Dinzing never charge. Around the Kore, some jungle, some Tapa Channel to this secure, and secure. Then the Tawa Magia, which you call a Tum, she told them,
in the next few lines, Jetson Koppa says, by the way, I'm talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines from the bottom on page 48. It starts out, Diryan Dundam to Yume Kitakta. Basically, what Jetson Koppa is saying is that, we don't have to go into a long analysis here about how to establish whether the thing is existing ultimately or not ultimately, or we don't have to go through the whole process of the analysis here, because you can understand it easily. Why? You've been through this analysis before. Where? Page 46. On the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10th line from the bottom, and 9th line, 8th line, 9th and 10th lines from the bottom, down to about the 4th line from the bottom. They went through this thing already of talking about is the tendency to see things as truly existing something which comes from its causes, or is it something which is just a figment of the imagination, like a fabrication or a projection? Because if it is if it is something that comes from its causes, then you can't say that it doesn't exist by definition, because it does exist by definition. And then you can't start describing its deceptive nature in terms of that. You know, remember that on page 46, the MindOnly school was objecting to what? They were trying to prove that the middle way school's presentation of the meaning of the word deceptive in the phrase deceptive reality was incorrect or inaccurate. And then they started to say, well, what do you mean when you said deceptive? They said, oh, deceived state of mind. Oh, and that deceived state of mind, pray tell, does that come from its causes and conditions, or is it just something which is itself a projection? And then they said, and then no matter which way the middle way school answers, they get into some kind of trouble. Jetson Kappa says, the same pattern holds here when the MindOnly school attacks the middle way school about how they characterized an example of what it would be to be ultimate reality, right? So having done that when they were talking about the meaning of the word deceptive and deceptive reality, having gone through that whole analysis with what? With reference to the state of mind which sees things as truly existing, that mistaken state of mind. Having finished all that already, in the case of their description, the middle way school's description of the word deceptive and deceptive reality, there's no need, says Jetson Kappa, for me to go, you know, it's easy for you to understand now the MindOnly school's argument with reference to the second case, which is the meaning of ultimate or ultimate reality. Okay, I don't have to go into that now because we finished all that. Okay, that's easy to get. Easy to get is on page 48, 6th line from the bottom. Kolawe deda shito. It's easy for me. It's easy for you guys to get it, and that's why I'm only giving you the briefest explanation here. I did say something about it. I didn't go into any long spiel about it, because you go back to page 46, you'll get it anyway.
빈징 매바차서는 빈징 짐바코 요 말이 짐바코 요 말이 시에 뭐 빈징 매바 랩사 찍고 간대요. 딱지 채나 깨져 튀나 맞지나 랩사고 찍고 간데 그게 정말로 정말 깨져 있는 거
If we went into a long analysis of it like we did before with the word deceptive and deceptive reality, and we start asking questions and examining and arguing back and forth, you know, what would we come out with? We'd come out with the same thing anyway. What? What's that? We'd come out with saying the state of mind that thinks that things exist truly doesn't exist at all. And then that misperception that it has doesn't exist at all either. And then there's all those problems with that not existing, you know. And so Jetson Kappa says, anyway, it's going to end up at the same point, isn't it? You're going to be saying that that tendency to see things as truly doesn't exist. Therefore, the thing that it's thinking about doesn't exist. Therefore, there doesn't exist anything about which you could say it's empty. No shenwangs. Then that mind itself, and then all these problems would, you know, Jetson Kappa says we've been through that. Even if we go through it again, all this questioning process, we're going to end up at the same destination. So that's why I just made a brief presentation. We started to talk about the meaning of ultimate reality.
What? 단 디네지는 시야도 단 인딩 디네지 시주시에 tel라 숨 추바 대달잖아. 예리시 대단하지. 대단하 늘 군다당 용이 견탐으로 내진 탄예도 여발라 겸마 대마를 그렇지 다 가르치게잖아 한교에 시왕 용도 군다 가발라 있나야 벌써 숨가로 찍배찍향나 그거 견탐으로 여말에 랑생도 여말에다 랑생도 여말에 탄예도 여발라 찍배찍향 숨고 한교에 있나야 샘담배 파 지디자 용도다 군다대는 저랑 디께지 시기도 와서 전담도 매 랑생이 주바 매 탄예도 여러서 깨지 시기도 대시하나 지금도 용도다 군다 아니나 깨 따사도 다 마땅하 체네 샤왕도 띵도 깨지 그 시기도 다들 지금도 와서 따사 땅송아 샘담배 간주와 디직송아
네, 하고만 생겨.
아니 독스라.
지단 것도 쓴 걸로.
왜 가르치나? 이와탄 시와 요도 군다 순간로 이와탄 시와.
나네. 요만.
진짜로 강생님 말. 당에도 예. 지금이야. 나타티다 다센터에 받았다 따사다는데 용도다 군다니라 땡도 깨져도 지마 송안데. 마티베시 시왕의 땡도 깨져도 지송아. 내가 시왕한테나 야만 딩딩기 땡.
나네.
뭐 티티고에 혼인이라 깨져도 직반이라 비하했어.
나니.
직반이라 비하할 때 이나 샤왕 용도 다 군다니 좀 깨져 맞지지. 샤왕 좀 깨져 티소아. 뭐 되래. 대단한 딜 군다당 용도 그런 담으로 매칭 당에도 여발라. 여세 tanju에 라바 콜라. 그 마템마지. 그 마템마 남마 좋아서. 구속이 시에바다 주비 시에바는 딘딘 거예요. 딘딘 동대거든 딘딘 거. 시에바 전 담바르 예메라 땅에 껴대송아 땅송. 어때마디 가르치어서는 샤와 아니 뭐 도스 같이
That's okay. Jessica Copper now raises a new issue. Okay, so this is, if you notice it, what did the middle way school said didn't exist by definition? What was it that the middle way school said didn't exist ultimately? They said, in their own words, right? No object in the universe exists ultimately. No object in the universe exists by definition. They made a blanket statement disregarding these fancy divisions of the MindOnly school, saying, oh, you have to divide things into dependent things, into things which are constructs, and then into things which are emptiness or totality, to use their words, okay? So you notice that the middle way school, when they began blasting around and saying nothing exists by definition, they didn't even bother to break it down into those three groups. They just said nothing exists by definition. Everything in the universe is such that it does not exist by definition. Now, why is it that when the MindOnly school wanted to counterattack, if you think about it, they only brought up one of those things. They only brought up dependent objects. Okay? They only brought up dependent objects in the form of the state of mind that holds things to exist truly. Okay? They didn't even bring up all dependent objects. They just bring up a representative of all dependent things, meaning the state of mind that thinks that things exist truly when they don't exist truly. So why is it, says Jetson Kappa, that they have not made their grievances, okay, or their complaints with regard to the other two attributes or the other two groups of things, meaning constructs and totality, or meaning emptiness in the MindOnly school? Why is it that they've only chosen to counterattack the middle way school with regard to changing things or dependent things, and they haven't said anything about, or they haven't made any attempt to prove why the middle way school must be wrong with the other two groups as well, when the middle way school started out by making a blanket statement that applied to all three? Why is that? That's a new issue.
샤왕 태연 담바를 메라 콘서트 옆에 깨짜디 깍바레스 단주에 용도 군다니라 마셔 받친 샤왕 되는 시에디 샤왕 태연 담바를 마도 메 태연 담바를 메 콘서트 옆에 단주에 렌시켜 오 코까기야레스 원어 코까고 지장 가르레스나 샤왕다 용도다 군다 그 샤왕다 군다다 용도 숨기나 네 또 최소의 가르치기 해서는 샤와도 송네 그이딩도 깨져지 시에네 되니 대단한 바 여다 매디 깨지 시에네 되니 지금마서는 감주도 좀 알아도 좀 가르쳐 그래 아 찌기찌기라 봐도 감주 저 빠지 시에 감주도 시에나요 다 간지 그이딩도 깨지 시에네 그 대단한 바 매빠지 소통나 용도 딱 끝나니 그 냠보 타고 내라고 쳐 그이딩도 찌기 그이딩도 대단한 바 여봐도 소통나 애네 용도 가라야 되니 깨져지 시에 초그레 삼 또 하나니 저 빠시자서 또 샤왕 송기 다래 제가 아니 샘담배장 샤왕이 빈도 깨져 티용도 끝나니라 깨져 시에나야 내가 깨졌다는 파티에 샤왕이 깨져 티고야 샤왕 또 이마 다시도 이마 개만 남지 저 빠지서 또 개만에 저 빠지야 거나 그런 지기 된담도 요 지기 된담도 내 오, 저서 또 샤왕이 빈도 깨져 쉬기다
Now, there's an answer to that question, okay? Why are people concentrating on shenwangs, on dependent things? The answer is this. Both parties being experienced debaters, both parties being sophisticated thinkers, both parties being experienced in the art of disputation, are going after the most important thing. It's as if it were a lawsuit, and there were other issues involved as well. But they're going to go after the main thing, because both parties realize that the battle is going to be won or lost with regard to dependent things. Dependent things are the linchpin of the ideas of the mind-only school as far as establishing what is emptiness and what isn't emptiness, right? And even the middle way school understands the implications. If they can demonstrate to the mind-only school that dependent things don't exist ultimately, don't exist by definition, then the others will be easy. You know, then to go on and say that that it's true of all the other categories of existing things, even according to the mind-only school, it'll be a piece of cake. Okay, so both parties, being experienced debaters, you know, seasoned warriors, they realize where the boundary is. You know, they realize that this is where the real battle has to be fought. It's with regard to changing objects, and that's why the mind-only school is only phrasing their questions in terms of changing objects, and among those a certain representative as being typical of changing objects, which is the very state of mind which thinks that things truly exist. Okay, that state of mind. If they can prove something to the middle way about that particular state of mind, then in their minds they have proven it about all other changing things, and that's the linchpin. Both parties understand this is where the battle's going to be won or lost.
똑바니 부하로 코 칸에 뛰어 거서는 시황 간에 마 뛰어 부하로 용도 따군다 나는 본인이 뛰어서요 말아 인다 군다기 똑바보 되네 다시라 군다기 다시 고야 시황이 띵도네 그럼 pom바도서는 pom바pom바시 다지 주고 주시랑이 진 춥세진 다사고 군다 시황이 다기로 오 이때 케와남지다 봐도 뼈받치 뒤자 니니 되는다 말이 유명을 뼈받레스 이제다 샘담배 군다다 용도미라 마티도 시황치
and then and Jetsu Kappa wraps it up there, and he nails it down. He says, look, Di-ni, next to last line, page 48. Di-ni meaning this very thing, this one thing, meaning dependent objects, right? Dependent things. They are the Yongdupi Chuchen. Yongdupi Chuchen. This is Chuchen, the word Chuchen used as it's used in Buddhist logic, right? The thing we're going to debate about, the thing we're going to ask questions about, the thing which is either going to have or not going to have a certain characteristic, which we call the Kei-chu and the Kei-shi. Okay, so the object which is the object which is either not going to have or which is going to have a certain quality which you're going to debate about. Okay, so if we take it, Yongdobi Chuchen means that object which possesses the characteristic of what? Of having a yondup, of having an emptiness that pertains to it or not. Emptiness needs something to be empty, right? So he says, if you think about it, it's shenwangs, it's dependent things that provide the object which we examine when we decide whether or not something is empty. Okay, whether or not it has a quality of emptiness. First reason to take that. Secondly, it is intimately involved with the process of labeling, or in the sense of either a verbal label or a mental label. So in one sense, Geshe-la was flirting with the idea that the labels themselves are shenwangs, aren't they? You know what I mean? The labeling word, whether you say labels consist of verbalizations or whether you say labels consist of ways of thinking about things, they are both intimately concerned with changing things or dependent things. Thirdly, we know that it's changing things that receive the labels. It's about changing things that you say, oh, this is that or this is that. You know, it's changing things which provide the basis for something to get a label. It's also changing things about which normally, Geshe-la said, you can have a misperception. You know, it's on that basis that you're saying, oh, that exists truly or that doesn't exist truly. These are the different flavors in which changing things are crucial, or are the crucial points. So kebas, last two syllables on page 48, if they're going to pick something, if they're going to pick some primary object to have their fight over, if they're going to pick a battlefield in which they're either going to win or lose, it's going to be shenwangs. It's going to be dependent things, because they both realize that this is the crucial thing. For all those reasons, shenwangs or dependent things are the crucial things in a debate over whether things exist ultimately or not. And that's the meaning of the first line of page 49. Okay. And today we'll stop there. All right. Geri sanin Koranda Bisco Sonia Koni Arila Palogre, Kotorusa Dogiomori, Koran da Lare Anita Sings in the Ani Sani Shoge Koto Peti Yongis, Ani Tugalalea Morana to any part Katu Dogre, Modern to any Bangwapan Dogre. Koto Gauti, Dana Gagare, you know, Koto San down a legature, Namgim Gilenga. Sangye Shindu Medewagi Doku Namdakshina Chapasho Idam Guru Rana Mandala Kandiyatayami Wadi Kyawakun Sanam Yeshe Tzozokshin Sanam Yeshe Nachume Tamba Kuni Topasho